60 million years ago, North America was very different. It was a lush, tropical paradise inhabited by dinosaurs, mammals, and a 50-foot-long monster called the Titanoboa, which remains the largest snake to ever exist. But this was not to last, because just like the dinosaurs, the Titanoboa would eventually die out, or so we thought. But what if it didn't? What if somehow this prehistoric beast managed to survive all those years and still lives today? Let's find out. Welcome to Paleologic, where we apply the lessons of the past to the possibilities of the future. So the Titanoboa was a truly terrifying creature. It lived in the tropical regions of North America during the height of the Cretaceous period. And according to fossils found in Alabama and the genus of Titanoboa, we can estimate that these snakes grew to be over 50 feet long and more than 1,000 pounds heavy. Their skulls were massive and their teeth were serrated, resembling a mix between a crocodile and a shark. This is honestly the stuff of nightmares, but it gets worse. Because while there are currently 3,700 species of snake alive today, none of them come anywhere near the size of the Titanoboa. That's because even though snakes continue to grow larger, they're still bound by evolution. Since there aren't any natural predators of snakes other than birds, there's no evolutionary pressure for them to stop growing. And since food isn't really a limiting factor for snakes, there's nothing stopping them from growing to hundreds of feet long. They just don't see a need to. So for snakes to get bigger, we have to introduce something that kills them, like maybe a giant bird. So let's imagine that 60 million years ago, something changed. Maybe a meteor didn't crash into Earth, or perhaps the asteroid that did hit Earth didn't wipe out all life. Whatever happened, the Titanoboa didn't go extinct, but instead survived and continued to evolve. How would this impact our world today? Well, let's start at the beginning. After the extinction of the dinosaurs, mammals started to diversify and become much larger. So by the time the Titanoboa evolved, there was plenty of prey available. Over millions of years, it grew even larger, reaching up to 100 feet in length. As a result, it became the apex predator of its environment. So while there may have been some large birds around, none of them were big enough to hunt the Titanoboa. But that doesn't mean that the Titanoboa remained at its maximum size. In fact, because of something called Cope's rule, we can assume that the opposite would happen. Cope's rule states that end members of lineages tend to increase in size through time. So over millions of years, the Titanoboa would simply keep growing until it reached the theoretical maximum size for snakes, roughly 200 to 400 feet long. However, this would only happen if the Titanoboa stuck to its current lifestyle. Since it would likely go extinct if it changed its behavior, this means that the Titanoboa would eat mostly fish, turtles, crocodiles, birds, and mammals. In short, anything that it could fit in its mouth. But even though this would decimate the biodiversity of North America, it wouldn't affect humans too much. Just like today, there would always be plenty of food available. It just wouldn't be nearly as enjoyable. This is why it's unlikely that the Titanoboa would play a role in our evolution, but that's not to say that it wouldn't influence our mythology. In fact, there are many similarities between the Titanoboa and the legendary sea monster called the Leviathan, both in appearance and in the way that they were perceived by early humans. The Titanoboa's skull resembled the head of a crocodile, which early humans might have interpreted as demonic, given how brutal the world was back then. On top of that, the Titanoboa hunted almost every animal that humans kept as livestock, destroying their crops and killing their pets. It's not hard to see how a snake like this could easily become a mythological beast that people told stories about around campfires. And it's entirely plausible that early humans exaggerated these stories, turning the Titanoboa into a multi-headed hydra. And even though the Titanoboa probably lived mostly in South America, it would still make occasional appearances in North America, similar to today's anacondas. But eventually, the Titanoboa would disappear, or so we thought. Because when European settlers arrived in North America, they would have encountered fossils of the Titanoboa, which they might have mistaken for dinosaur bones. With a little imagination, they could have sworn that they saw one of these giant snakes alive in the rainforest, although most people would have probably written these off as fever dreams. Even today, there are alleged sightings of large snakes in the Amazon rainforest, such as the giant anaconda, which grows to be up to 30 feet long. There have even been alleged sightings of a 60-foot-long green anaconda. Although these are likely exaggerated, they show that there's still some truth to these ancient myths. But what if one day someone actually stumbled upon a Titanoboa? Well, first off, it wouldn't look anything like the cartoon version of it. The Titanoboa wasn't covered in scales, but instead had smooth, dry skin like today's boas. It would also lack any sort of fur, feathers, or hair. So unless you were attacked by a pack of wild dogs while wading through the water, you probably wouldn't get bitten. But that doesn't mean it would be friendly. In fact, even though the Titanoboa would be somewhat slow-moving like an elephant, it could strike extremely fast when needed. When it lunged, it would deliver a bite force of 1 to 300 psi. To put this into perspective, a lion only delivers 600 psi of force when biting down on its prey. And even though the Titanoboa couldn't constrict like other snakes, its bite would easily break your bones and kill you within seconds. So, if you wanted to survive, you would have to capture it, which wouldn't be easy. In fact, it would require the entire military to take it down. Soldiers would have to use helicopters to track the Titanoboa through the jungle, then bring it down with high-powered rifles. And even though it would take dozens of bullets to kill it, they would have to make sure that the snake didn't release its death grip before they finished it off. In short, fighting the Titanoboa would be a nightmare. This is why the best strategy would be to capture it alive, which has been done with anacondas before. Once the Titanoboa was captured, it could either be taken back to a zoo or be put down and have its body studied by scientists. This is how we would learn how intelligent the Titanoboa actually was. Since snakes are reptiles, we can assume that they share a common ancestor. And this means that the Titanoboa was closely related to dinosaurs. If that's true, then it could have exhibited complex behaviors similar to birds. But unlike birds, it would likely have been dimorphized, meaning that males and females looked very different from each other. Female Titanoboas would have been much larger, which would allow them to lay larger eggs, ensuring the survival of their offspring. And even though the Titanoboa might seem scary, it wouldn't necessarily be evil. Snakes don't experience emotions like malice and joy, so they don't really have a good or evil side. They just do whatever they need to survive. But it's safe to say that humanity wouldn't understand that. We would immediately begin hunting the Titanoboa, even though it posed no real threat to us. This would cause the Titanoboa to retreat deeper into the rainforest, where it would become a rare, mysterious beast. Some people would claim that they saw it, while others would write these accounts off as lies. Eventually, the mystery would fade away until one day, a new sighting occurred. And even though the Titanoboa would be mostly nocturnal, we would still catch glimpses of it through the jungle. This is why the Titanoboa would leave a lasting legacy on our world, even if it chose not to kill us. So, if you ever hear a story about a giant snake living in the rainforest, don't believe it. Just kidding, you better believe it. But seriously, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Also, thank you to my supporters for supporting this channel.